Chapter 13 of Martha by the Day. This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit Librivox.org. Martha by the Day by Julie M. Lippmann. Chapter 13. "Hello, Martha," said Radcliffe. Mrs. Slawson bowed profoundly. "Hello yourself. I ain't had the pleasure of meeting you for quite some time past, and yet I notice my absence ain't made no serious alteration for the worst in your appearance. You ain't fell away none, on account of my not being here." "Fell away from what?" asked Radcliffe. "Fell away from nothing. That's what they call a figure of speech. Means you ain't got thin." "Well, you've got thin, haven't you, Martha? I don't remember your cheeks had those two long lines in 'em before." "Lines?" repeated Martha, regarding herself in the mirror of an étagère she was polishing. "Them ain't lines, them's dimples." Radcliffe scrutinized her critically for a moment. "They're not like Miss Lang's dimples," he observed at last. "Miss Lang's dimples look like when you blow in your milk to cool it. They're there, and then they ain't there. She vanishes them in, and she vanishes them out. But those lines in your face, they just stay. Only they weren't there before, when you were here. The secret is, my dimples is the kind that takes longer to vanish 'em out when once you vanished 'em in. Mine's way-trained dimples. Miss Lang's is express. But you can take it from me, dimples is fascinatin', whatever species they are." "What's fascinatin'?" "It's the thing in some things that when it ain't in other things, you don't care a thing about 'em." "Are you fascinatin'?" "That's not for me to say," said Martha, feigning coyness. "But this much I will confess, that some folks which shall be nameless considers me so, and they ought to know." "Is Miss Lang fascinatin'?" "Ask your Uncle Frank." "Why must I ask him?" "If you want to know." "Does he know?" "Probably. He is a very well-informed gentleman on most subjects." "I don't want to ask my Uncle Frank anything about Miss Lang. Once I asked him something about her, and he didn't like it." "What did you ask him?" "I asked him if she wasn't his best girl." "What did he say?" "He said, 'No,' quick, just like that. 'No.' I guess he was cross with me, and I know he didn't like it. When I asked my mother why he didn't like it, she said, 'Because Miss Lang's only my governess.' And when I told Miss Lang what my mother said, she told me, Miss Lang, she didn't like it either." "Now, what do you think of that?" ejaculated Martha. "Nobody didn't seem to like nothing in that combination, did they? You was the only one in the whole outfit that showed any tack." "What means that, tack?" "It's a little thing that you use when you want to keep things in place, keep 'em from falling down. There's two kinds. One you must hammer in, and the other you mustn't." "I wish Miss Lang was my Uncle Frank's best girl, but I guess she's somebody else's." "Eh?" said Martha sharply, sitting back on her heels and twisting her polishing cloth into a rope, as if she were wringing it out. "Now, whose best girl do you think she is, if I may make so bold?" Radcliffe settled down to business. "Yesterday, Miss Lang and me was coming home from the Tippydrome, and my mother, she had company in the drawing-room, and I didn't know there was company first off, 'cause Shaw he didn't tell us, and I guess I kind of talked loud in the hall, and my mother she heard me, and she wasn't cross or anything, she just called to me to come along in and see the company. And I said, 'No, I won't, not unless Miss Lang comes too.' And my mother she said, 'Miss Lang come too?' And Miss Lang she didn't want her, but she had her. And the company was a gentleman and a lady. And the minute the gentleman he saw Miss Lang, he jumped up out of his chair like a jumping jack, and his eyes got all kind of sparkly, and he held out both of his hands to her, and sort of shook her hands, till you'd think he'd shake 'em off. And my mother she said, I see you and Miss Lang are already acquainted, Mr. Van Brandt." And he laughed a lot, the way you do when you're just tickled to death, and he said, "Acquainted? Well, I should say so. Miss Lang and I are old, old friends." And he kept looking at her and looking at her, the way you feel when there's something on the table you like, and you're fearful fraid it'll be gone before it's passed to you. And my mother, she said to the other company, Miss Pelham, "This is Radcliffe." And Miss Pelham, she was looking sideways at Miss Lang and Mr. What's-his-name, but she pretended she was looking at me, and she said, she's a smarty gave a party, Miss Pelham is. She said, "Radcliffe, Radcliffe, I wonder if you're any relation to Radcliffe College." And I said, "No, I wonder if you are any relation to Pelham Manor." And while they was laughing, and my mother, she was telling how precocious I am, my Uncle Frank, he came in. He came in kind of quiet, like he always does, and he stood in the door, and Mr. What's-his-name was talking to Miss Lang so fast, and looking at her so hard, they didn't neither of them notice. And when my Uncle Frank, he noticed they didn't notice, 'cause they was having such fun by themselves, he put his mouth together like this, like when your tooth hurts and you bite on it to make it hurt some more. And then he talked a lot to Miss Pelham, and didn't smile pleasantly and happy at Mr. What's-his-name and Miss Lang when my mother, she introduced them. And soon Miss Lang, she took me upstairs, and she didn't look near so tickled to death as Mr. Van Brandt. He looked. And when I asked her if she wasn't, she said, "Of course I am. Mr. Van Brandt was a friend of mine when I was a little girl, and when you're a stranger in a strange land, anybody you knew when you was at home seems dear to you." But she didn't look near so pleased as he did. He looked more like my Uncle Frank. He did before he got talking so much to Miss Pelham. And now I guess the way of it is, Miss Pelham's my Uncle Frank's best girl, and Miss Lang's Mr. What's-his-name's. Well, now, who believed you could have seen so much? Why, you're a regular old sleuth, the detective, or Sherlock Holmes, or somebody like that, for discovering things, ain't you? I don't want Miss Pelham to be my Uncle Frank's best girl, and I don't see why that other man, he don't have her for his, like she was first off, and leave my Miss Lang alone." "It all is certainly very dark and mysterious," said Mrs. Slosson, shaking her head. "You don't know where you're at all, like when you wake up in the black night and hear the clock give one strike. You couldn't tell if your life hung in the ballast, if it's 12:30 or 1, or 1:30. Radcliffe pondered this for a space, but was evidently unable to fathom its depth, for presently he let it go with a sigh, and swung off to another topic. "Say, do you know our cook, Liza, the one we used to have, has gone away?" "So I gathered from not having saw her fairy figure hovering round the kitchen as I come in, and meeting another lady in her place, name of Augusta, Beatrice said." "Yes, sir. Augusta's the new one. I guess Augusta don't drink." "Which you suggesting Liza does?" "Well, my mother, she don't know I know, but I do. I heard Shaw telling about it. 'Twas Liza's day out, and she went and got toxicated, and a policeman he took her up, and next morning my Uncle Frank, they sent to him out of the station house to have him bail her out." My, she was as full as that. "What's bail her out?" inquired Radcliffe. Mrs. Slosson considered. "When a boat gets full of water because of leaking sides, or heavy rains, or shipping seas, or whatever they calls it, you bail her out with a tin can, or a sponge, or anything you have by you." "Was Liza full of water?" "I was describing boats," said Martha. "And talking of boats, did I tell you we got a new kitten to our house? He's a grey Maltese. His name is Nix Comarouse." Why is his name that?" "Nix Comarouse? His name's Nix Comarouse because he's from the Dutchman's house. If you listen good, you'll see that's poetry." "Nix Comarouse from the Dutchman's house." "I didn't make it up, but it's poetry all the same. A Dutch gentleman who lives next door to me made him a present to our family." "Do you like him?" "The Dutch gentleman? No, that Nix, the cat." "Certainly we like him. He's a decent, self-respecting little fella that tends to his own business and keeps good hours. And you oughter see how grand him and Flicker gets along. Talk of a cat and dog existence. Why, of all the married parties I know, not to speak of some others that ain't, hit it off as good as Flicker and Nick's come her house, there wouldn't be no occasion for so many ladies taking the rest cure at Reno. What's Reno? Reno? Why, Reno's short for merino, like I'd say. Nix for Nick's come her house, which is a kinder woolen goods you make dresses out of. There, did you hear the schoolroom bell? I thought I heard it ringing a while ago, but I wasn't sure. Hurry now, and don't keep Miss Lang waiting. She wants you to come straight along up, so she can learn you to be a big and handsome gentleman like your Uncle Frank. When Radcliffe had left her, Martha went over in her mind the items he had guilelessly contributed to her general fund of information. Take it all in all, she was not displeased with what they seemed to indicate. Confidence is a good thing to have, but a little wholesome doubt don't hurt the masculine gender none. I guess if I was put to it, I could count on one hand, with no fingers, the number of gentlemen, no matter how plain, have died because way down in their hearts they believed they wasn't real A1 winners. That's one thing it takes a lot of hard usage to convince the sect of. They may feel they ain't getting their dues, that they're misunderstood and being sold below cost, but that they're actually shop-worn, or what's called seconds, or put on the as-is counter because they're cracked or broke, or otherwise slightly disfigured, but still in the ring. Why, that never seems to percolate through their brains, like those coffee pots they use nowadays, that don't make no better coffee than the old kind if you know how to do it good in the first place. On the other hand, ladies is dreadful trying. They act like they're the discoverers of perpetual emotion, and is on the job demonstrating. You can't count on 'em for 1 minute to the next, which they certainly was never born to be aromatic cash registers. And perhaps that's the reason, being naturally so poor at figures, they got to rely to such an extent on corsets. I'm all for women myself. I believe they're the common man. But I must confess, if I'm about to speak the truth, it ain't for the simple, uninfected, childlike mind of the male persuasion to follow their figgeries, unless he's some of a trained acrobat. Now, the harsh way Miss Clare has toward Mr. Ronald, you'd think he had give himself dead away to her and was down on his knee-pans, humble as a Episcopalian saying the litany in Lent, grubbing about among the dust she treads on to touch the hem of her garment, whereas, in some way unbeknownst to me and probably unbeknownst to him, he's touched her pride, which is why she's so up in arms, not meaning his. Worse luck. And it would have all worked out right in the end, and will yet, if this new party that Radcliffe mentioned ain't Mr. Botinsky, and she don't follow the dictates of her art and flirt with him too outrageous, or else marry him to spite herself, which is what I mean to prevent if I can, but which, of course, it may be I can't. End of chapter 13. Read by Sandra.